He just looked at me, his eyes cold and unmoving, and said, "No jeans." The words hung in the air, ridiculous and absolute. I glanced down at the perfectly normal dark-wash denim I was wearing. Then I looked back at him, at his cheap polyester tie and the smug little smile playing on his lips. This was our district manager, a man who visited maybe twice a year, and he had chosen this moment to wield his power. I kept my voice even, professional. "I understand, but I just came from a full day of classes on campus. This is standard for everyone on staff. It never has been an issue before." He puffed out his chest, a clear sign of his insecurity. "It is an issue today. Company policy is no jeans. Go home and change if you want to finish your shift." My name is Audrey, and for the last 3 years, I was the assistant manager of the last video store in town. It was 2011, and the world was moving on to streaming, but our little outpost of physical media was my kingdom. I took a quiet pride in the perfectly alphabetized shelves and the well-oiled machine of our daily operations. This job was my ticket to a debt-free college education. I treated it with the seriousness of a career, not just some part-time gig. I was meticulous, patient, and I genuinely cared about the place. I knew every regular by name and could recommend a movie for any mood. Our store was part of a dying chain, and corporate was a distant, disconnected entity. They had a thick binder of rules, most of them written in the 90s. Among them, buried in the dress code section, was the infamous no jeans policy. It was a rule that existed only on paper. Every single employee, including the store manager who had hired me, wore jeans every single day. We were practical. We were on our feet for 8 hours, hauling boxes of new releases and climbing ladders to fix signs. We wore our collared company polo shirts, we were neat, and we did our jobs exceptionally well. That was the unspoken agreement. This agreement was the foundation of our store's quiet success. It was a bond of common sense that allowed us to focus on what mattered, keeping the lights on and the customers happy. But I always knew, in the back of my mind, that a rule is a tool, and in the wrong hands, a tool can become a weapon. Now, standing under the buzzing fluorescent lights, I was face to face with the wrong hands. The district manager wasn't just enforcing a rule, he was enjoying it. He saw an opportunity to remind anyone, that he was in charge. I tried logic one more time, my voice calm and steady. "Sir, I am the only employee scheduled to work after 6 o'clock this evening. It's a 45-minute round trip to my apartment. If I leave, you will have to run the store by yourself for an hour during our busiest time." I watched his face for any sign of reason, any flicker of concern for the business he was supposed to be overseeing. There was nothing. He simply stared, his expression a flat wall of authority. He was a man who cared about the letter of the law, not the spirit of it. He saw a subordinate in jeans. I saw a business about to be left unattended, angry customers, and lost revenue all over a piece of clothing. My meticulous nature, the very thing that made me so good at my job, was screaming at the sheer inefficiency of his demand. For years, I had avoided conflict. I believed that doing good work, being reliable, and showing respect was enough. I trusted that my dedication would be recognized and that petty power plays were beneath a professional environment. That was my mistake. I had underestimated the arrogance of a small man with a little bit of power. He didn't care about the store. He only cared about winning this pointless standoff. He crossed his arms, the picture of unearned confidence. I held his gaze for a long moment. My mind, which was usually occupied with inventory counts and shift schedules, was suddenly crystal clear. I saw the entire situation laid out like a chessboard. He had made his move, a clumsy, obvious play. And in that instant, something inside me shifted. The patient, conflict-averse assistant manager clocked out. A new part of me, a far more meticulous and much less forgiving part, clocked in. I gave him a small, polite nod. "Okay," I said, my voice betraying none of the cold fury solidifying in my chest. "I will go home and change." He thought he had won. He thought I was just another hourly employee dutifully following orders. He had no idea what he had just started. He had weaponized the employee handbook. So would I. As I walked toward the back room to grab my purse, my mind was already racing, pulling up every obscure policy, every forgotten rule, every single line of that corporate binder I had been forced to memorize during my management training. He wanted to play by the book. Fine. I was about to show him what it was like to be crushed by it. He wanted to play by the book. Fine. I was about to show him what it was like to be crushed by it. I walked out the front door without a backward glance, the little bell over the door chiming my temporary departure. The 45-minute drive home was a blur of red taillights and simmering rage. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The sheer, unadulterated pettiness of it all was what got to me. It was an insult to my intelligence and my work ethic. This man didn't know the first thing about me. He didn't know that I had personally organized the entire back catalog, creating a system so efficient that we could find any movie in under 30 seconds. He didn't know that I was the one who trained every new employee, patiently walking them through the point-of-sale system and teaching them how to handle difficult customers. All he saw was a young woman in a pair of jeans, an easy target for a meaningless power trip. He wanted to feel important, and he had used a dusty, forgotten rule to do it. The disrespect of it burned hotter than any simple anger. It was a calculated move to remind me of my place, and it was going to backfire on him spectacularly. I stormed into my small apartment, tossing my keys onto the counter with a loud clatter. My first instinct was pure compliance. I just wanted to grab a pair of black slacks, get back to my store, and salvage the rest of my shift. I needed the hours, and I hated the idea of him fumbling his way through a Friday night rush. I swung open my closet door, my eyes scanning for the sensible, boring work pants I wore on the rare occasions we had a corporate visit. My hand was reaching for the familiar polyester blend when I stopped. I caught my reflection in the long mirror on the back of the door. My face was flushed with anger, my posture tense. And in that moment, a wave of cold clarity washed over me. The fury didn't disappear, but it changed. It cooled and sharpened, transforming from a blunt instrument into a surgeon's scalpel. This wasn't about pants. This was about respect. This was about a man who used rules as a shield for his own inadequacy. An idea sparked, bright and dangerous. I wasn't just going to comply. I was going to obey. I was going to follow his directive with such overwhelming, pedantic precision that he would regret ever opening his mouth. My gaze drifted past my everyday clothes to a long garment bag hanging in the very back of the closet. My professional skill isn't just renting movies, it's understanding presentation. I know how to organize a shelf to draw the eye. I know how to create a display that makes people want to watch a film they've never heard of. I was about to apply that same skill set to myself. He wanted not jeans. I would give him the furthest possible thing from jeans. I pulled the bag out and set it on my bed. The zipper made a satisfying, decisive sound as I pulled it down. Inside was the fanciest, most professional outfit I owned. A sharp, three-piece power suit in a deep, commanding shade of blue. I had bought it for a mock trial competition in my pre-law program, and it radiated an aura of untouchable competence. I laid the pieces out on my bed. The lined trousers with a perfect crease, the matching vest, the structured blazer with its single, authoritative button. This was not the uniform of a video store clerk. This was the uniform of someone who owned the entire chain. I went to my dresser and pulled out a starched, white, French-cuffed shirt. I found the small, velvet box that held the silver cufflinks my grandfather had left me. They were simple, elegant, and felt heavy and important in my palm as I clicked them into place. Next, I chose my biggest, most serious-looking watch, its metal band cool against my skin. I applied a subtle touch of a woody, expensive cologne, just enough to be noticed. This was a full sensory assault on his petty expectations. Finally, the shoes. I ignored my sensible flats and pulled out a pair of black heels. They weren't outrageously high, but they were high enough to change my posture, to make me stand taller. Most importantly, they made a sharp, distinct click on hard floors. It was the sound of purpose, the sound of someone who was not to be trifled with. I stood before the mirror again, but the person looking back was not the same one who had arrived minutes earlier. The angry, flustered employee was gone. In her place was a woman who looked like she could foreclose on the entire building. Every detail was perfect. Every line was sharp. I was a walking, talking embodiment of the corporate dress code he so admired. He wanted malicious compliance. I was about to give him malicious professionalism. I was going to obey his stupid rules so flawlessly, so completely, that it would make his teeth ache. He thought he was teaching me a lesson, but I was about to become his teacher. He thought he was teaching me a lesson, but I was about to become his teacher. The first lesson began the moment I opened the store's glass door. The little bell chimed, a cheerful sound that was completely at odds with my ice-cold intentions. My heels made a sharp, rhythmic clicking on the worn linoleum floor, a sound that cut through the low hum of the air conditioner and the muffled dialogue from the televisions. The district manager's head snapped up from where he was leaning on the counter, looking profoundly bored. A few customers were browsing the aisles, but every ounce of his attention was suddenly on me. His eyes widened, and his jaw went slack, just for a second, before he caught himself and tried to compose his features into a neutral mask. It was too late. I had seen it, the flicker of disbelief, of utter confusion. He looked me up and down, from the sharp shoulders of my blazer to the crisp cuffs of my shirt, all the way down to the polished tips of my heels. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, like a fish gasping for air. I walked directly to the counter and offered him a bright, professional smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'm back and ready to work," I announced, my voice clear and even. "Thank you for your patience and for holding down the fort. I've clocked back in and am prepared to resume my duties for the remainder of my shift." For the next 2 hours, he was a ghost in my store. He didn't speak. He just watched me from a stool behind the counter, a storm of confused annoyance brewing behind his eyes. I, on the other hand, was the model employee. I moved with a newfound purpose, my every action precise and deliberate. I greeted every customer with impeccable courtesy. I restocked a display of new release DVDs, making sure every single case was perfectly aligned. I wiped down an already clean counter. My movements were fluid and efficient, underscored by the constant, authoritative click of my heels on the floor. One of our regulars, an older gentleman named Mr. Henderson, came up to the counter with his usual stack of classic movies. He blinked at me, a smile playing on his lips. "Well, Audrey," he said, his voice a friendly rumble. "Big interview after this? You look like you're about to buy the whole company." This was my moment. I leaned forward conspiratorially, lowering my voice just enough so the district manager had to strain to hear. "Oh, nothing like that, Mr. Henderson. I just believe in taking this job very seriously. Our customers, like you, deserve to rent their movies in a respectful and thoroughly professional environment." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him flinch. It was a small, almost imperceptible tightening of his shoulders, but to me, it was a victory banner. I rang up Mr. Henderson's movies, my smile never wavering. He couldn't say a word. How could he? What was he going to do, reprimand me for being too well-dressed? Write me up for exceeding the standards of the corporate dress code? His one and only weapon was the rule book, and I had just taken it from him. He had been so obsessed with the letter of the law that he was left completely powerless when I followed it to its most absurd and logical conclusion. He wanted an employee who was not wearing jeans. I had given him exactly that, and in doing so, I had made him look utterly ridiculous. His petty power trip had been completely and silently diffused. He was a man trapped in the prison of his own rules. He had built the walls, locked the door, and handed me the key. All I had to do was use it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silent, awkward supervision, he checked his watch and stood up. He gathered his cheap, imitation leather briefcase from the floor and straightened his polyester tie. He cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. He walked to the door, his steps heavy with defeat. He paused with his hand on the handle, his back still to me. For a moment, I thought he was going to leave without another word. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, he muttered, "Thank you." It wasn't a real thank you. It was an admission of surrender. It was the sound of a petty tyrant who had been outmaneuvered by the very rules he loved to enforce. The bell chimed as the door closed behind him. He never spoke directly to me again. He never spoke directly to me again. His subsequent visits over the next few months were models of pathetic efficiency. He would arrive, clipboard in hand, and perform his inspection in near total silence. He would count the cash drawers, check the inventory logs, and measure the height of our promotional displays with a small tape measure. He did everything by the book, his face a permanent mask of strained neutrality. He never made eye contact with me. If he needed something, he would ask one of the other employees, even if I was standing right next to him. My presence in the store had become a silent monument to his public humiliation. The story of the suit had become a quiet legend among the staff, a source of solidarity and amusement. We all knew the unspoken truce regarding jeans was now ironclad. I, of course, went back to wearing my normal, sensible work clothes. The power suit was retired to the back of my closet, its job done. I didn't need to wear it again. The victory wasn't in the outfit itself, but in the knowledge that I could, at any moment, deploy a level of professionalism so extreme it became a weapon. Then, one Tuesday morning, a new face appeared. She was a woman in her 40s, with a warm smile and a sharp, intelligent look in her eyes. She wore a simple but elegant blouse and a pair of well-tailored slacks. She introduced herself as Carol, our new district manager. She spent the day with us, but her approach was completely different. She didn't hide behind a clipboard. She asked us for our opinions on how to improve customer flow. She wanted to know what movies our regulars were asking for. She treated us like assets, not like subordinates who needed to be constantly monitored. Later that afternoon, while we were in the back office reviewing sales reports, she gestured vaguely toward the front of the store. "I read the file on my predecessor," she said, a hint of dry humor in her voice. "Seems he had a bit of a fixation on the dress code." I just smiled, a calm, neutral expression. He was very committed to the company handbook. Carol let out a small laugh. "That's one way to put it. We got a few complaints about his management style, not just from this store. He was a bit of a stickler for rules that haven't made sense since 1998. She leaned back in her chair, the picture of practical competence. Anyway, they transferred him, sent him to oversee the Midwest Plains district. It's where they send managers who can't seem to grasp the difference between managing a business and playing hall monitor. I knew what that meant. It was corporate purgatory. A remote, underperforming district with a dozen dying stores scattered across 3 states. It was a place where careers went to fade into obscurity, a slow professional death by 1,000 miles of empty highway. His obsession with the letter of the law had led him to a dead end. A few months after that, I walked across a stage to receive my college diploma. The video store had served its purpose. It had been my steady ship, getting me through the financial storm of my education without a single cent of debt. I gave my 2 weeks' notice, trained my replacement, and said goodbye to the regulars I had come to know so well. I now work in a field where a suit is my daily uniform. I walk into boardrooms and client meetings, and the sharp tailoring and professional silhouette feel like a second skin. But I wear it on my own terms, as a symbol of my competence and my position, which I earned through hard work and dedication. I never forgot the lesson I learned that day. It was never really about a pair of jeans or a petty abuse of power. It was the day I learned that true strength isn't about shouting the loudest or avoiding conflict at all costs. It's about understanding the system you're in better than the people who run it. It's about knowing that sometimes the most devastating, most complete, and most professional response to a petty tyrant is to give them exactly what they asked for: